All right, we're studying some highlights in Jeremiah and probably some lowlights. Sometimes it gets kind of depressing with all of the things that God's trying to get across to this nation. About 100 years or so after Israel has been dispersed and ceased to exist, that's the 10 northern tribes, God is bringing judgment upon Judah. And Jeremiah, remember Jeremiah started in the 12th or 13th year of Josiah preaching this judgment that was going to come upon Judah. Even though Josiah was a good king, still the nation hadn't turned their hearts and lives to God, so judgment was coming. One of the main reasons that I think, and it seems to be pointed out in the book of Jeremiah, was that what the final straw was that determined that God was going to judge Judah was the fact that they were offering their children up as sacrifice to the god Moloch in the valley of the son of Hinnom, place called Tophet. And the way I read it, it looks like that was the final straw with God. He said, I'm going to judge you. He said, I never even thought that you would do such a thing. He said, it never come into my mind. You know, God who knows everything. I mean, that's a strange thing, but that's what God said. I never thought that you people would do such a thing like that. It never come into my mind. And so I think that was one of the primary reasons that God was bringing judgment. And so in light of the present day, I kind of think that, hey, how's God looking upon the fact that we've aborted over 57 million babies in this country? Does it mean that God's just going to overlook us? Jonathan Cahn feels like judgment is coming upon this country. You know, Bill says that judgment is coming upon this country. You know, I know that there's some that are prophesying that this is that we're in renewal, that the nation's turning around, we're coming back to God and everything. I don't see evidence of that yet. I can hope for that, but I don't see evidence of that yet, you know. But I have a feeling that in reading in the book of Jeremiah, I have a feeling that God's not going to let this nation get by with some of the things that we're doing in this country, and it's being accepted. I think that's the worst sin, is that not that something is happening that is degrading and against God, not that something is happening, but that it's accepted. As a nation, we're beginning to accept these things, that's just normal, you know, and it ought to be accepted. And I think that is the major sin. I heard a preacher one time say that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was not sodomy necessarily. It was sodomy, but the real sin that brought judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah was that the officials and the nation, the cities, had accepted it as being a way of life, the right thing, you know. And I think that's what's happening in our nation. We're accepting those things that God has declared to be sin. And I think eventually God's got to bring this nation to its knees. I would hope that in some way there's going to be a turning around and a revival, and that people will come, that people will be flocking to God and trying to, you know, and what, you know, I can hope for that, and I can pray for that, you know. But unless we change our ways, just like God told Judah, unless you seek the old paths, unless you go back to the old ways, you know. See? I know a lot of times we're critical about yesteryear and some of the things that we did in yesteryear, but you can't throw everything out. We did a lot of good stuff in yesteryear, you know. We honored God. And even those people that weren't church, they honored God, you know. You can't throw everything out. I know that I know a lot of times, as long as we're humans are involved, things are not going to be done exactly as they should. Get God involved, and everything will happen as it should. That's the difference, you know. And we need to put God right back in the center of everything that's going on. I want to see Him sitting right in the center of this Sunday school class today. Amen. I want to see Him directing and guiding everything that goes on. I want to see us walk out of this place today knowing that we've been in the presence of God. And whether we're sick, we're healed. Whether we're discouraged, we're encouraged because we've been in the presence of God. You know.
Raymond, is it kind of as simple as things could be to change things? For instance, we all know that it's the way we're brought up. And when you get that in school, if all the Christians got together one day and say, until we get Christianity back in the schools and their values, we're not sending our kids to school. It'd shut the schools down and everything would change. It'd be just one simple thing. All the churches get together and say, we're boycotting.
Yeah, something needs to happen. Yes, sir.
I think 9/11, everybody thought that was going to be the turning point, which it was for 6 months, you know, and then we just accept and went back in our old routine again.
Mm-hmm. For a while, people flocked to churches. Mm-hmm. Right after that happened, knowing that, look, you know, and then after they seen nothing else was going to take place, and they went back to their old ways. Yes, ma'am.
Just trying to give you a cough drop there. Well, it's like people in the foxhole. They'll pray while they're in there and shells are coming down, but after they get out. Yeah, they forget.
I just know that what we're doing and what we're hearing, you just turn the radio or the TV on, and you can hear what's going on in our nation and what's going on in the world. You got to know that God's about to bring this thing to a head. I mean, you know, I don't see how anybody could deny that we're living in the last days. We see Israel over there, a little nation that became a nation in one day, you know, in our lifetime. Yes. Prophecy fulfilled in our lifetime. And we see that nation coming alive. We see a language that was dead for centuries being revived, a Hebrew language coming back after years of non-existence, you know. And then we see what's going on out there. You've got to know Jesus is about to come back. He's about to bring this thing to an end, you know. Yes, sir.
I watched David Raymond last night on TV. He had 17 prophecy teachers on there. Did you see anybody else? 9 of them, when he asked the question, what's the most important thing you're seeing happening to indicate the Lord's return? 9 of them said it was the Jewish people coming back into their land. The others said it was all of the different things in prophecy that are happening today all over the world that indicates the Lord's soon return.
Mm-hmm. There's a feeling. I don't know whether y'all got it or not. I don't know whether, but there is just a spiritual realization that is gripping the hearts of believers today, that knowing that we're on the verge of the Lord coming back for His church.
Right.
We are. Yes, ma'am.
We went to, and he probably remembers verbatim, but I don't remember all of what they were saying, but we went to a conference, Inspire. You know, I work at YWAM now. And we went to this conference for, several hundred were there. And there was a lady that was speaking, because she ministers to people that are in countries that, that have not a lot, the gospel has not been reached yet, so she goes to those countries. She said back in the early 1900s, there was like only 40% of the world that had heard the gospel. Well, of course, YWAM, Christ for the Nations, and I don't know how many, there were 4, maybe 5 ministries that come together now. And there's only 30%, there's 70-30 now. 30 have not heard the gospel, and with what is putting into translations Bibles for those people, so missionaries can go to them. And she thinks within, this lady thinks within like 2 years, maybe less, maybe a little more, that the whole world, every nation will heard the gospel. I thought it was just real exciting to hear him say that, because these are the people that are going out there, you know.
Well, I mean, the gospel is being preached, and besides the scripture says that the gospel shall be preached to all nations, then shall the end come, you know. But you got to remember, in the book of Revelation, you know, there's angels preaching the gospel. I mean, God sends angels preaching the gospel. 2 witnesses preaching, 144,000 preaching the gospel. You know, what I'm trying to say is the church don't have to be the one that's here. You know, we can be gone, and I am a pre-trib. I believe in pre-trib, so church can be gone. There'll be 144,000 Jewish believers that would come up and be preaching the gospel. There would be those 2 witnesses. And then there would be those 3 mighty angels that would be going, preaching the gospel, telling them, hey, it's over. I mean, time shall be no more, you know. So I don't see anything that would keep Jesus from coming today. And maybe we're living in that period of time because of all the things we're talking. Somebody talked about the blood moon. Somebody talked about the solar eclipse that's going to take place on the 20th, you know. And then we got a lunar eclipse that's going to take place on Passover, the 5th of next month, you know, and all these blood moons and things that are falling on the feast days. I mean, does that say anything? I think it says, pay attention, God's about to do something. We don't know what, but God's about to do something. And I think that's the exciting thing, is that we know that God's in control, and God has a calendar that He goes by, and He set up these certain feast days that He does special things on. Like Jesus died on a feast day. He was resurrected on a feast day. The Holy Spirit come on a feast day. You know, so that's something's about to happen, folks. I don't know whether y'all feel it or not, but something's about to happen, and we're about to enter into a sabbatical. I mean, we're in a sabbatical year. We're about to enter into a jubilee year. Come September, we'll be moving into a jubilee year when everything is restored. You know. So, I mean, that could be when we're with Jesus, you know. Anyway, let's go back to Jeremiah, unless somebody else got something else to say. Yes, sir.
There's one thing that is mentioned in the Battle of Armageddon. It talks about the people that fight. Nowhere can it be found that this country is involved in that.
Right.
And the reason for that is if the president or taking up or whatever happens before then, because this country will be in such chaos, they couldn't do nothing. Because there's too many Christians here that will actually be gone.
Yeah, you can just think, you're talking about chaos. And I don't know why we got off on this today. Maybe that's what the Lord wants, but think about the chaos that would take place if all of a sudden millions of people disappear, you know, from the face of the earth. Think about the economic situation that would develop. Think about the unrest that would develop. Think about the looting and all of the other things that would begin to take place, and even to the disasters that will occur. You know, if all of a sudden millions of people disappear from the face of the earth, and you know, that could be very, very well be part of that end time scenario that all of a sudden the church is gone out of here, and the man of sin then is revealed. You know, interesting. We have this hope. I am persuaded that he's able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day.
Yes, amen.
Somebody else, before we go on. We don't have to even go to the lesson if you want to share something. Okay? Well, Jesus is coming. Y'all hear what I said? Jesus is coming. Maybe we've not dwelt on that message enough. He's coming. He said, "Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions, dwelling places." And he said, "If I go, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also."
Hallelujah.
Coming back. He's coming back. And we can look at all of these signs. You know, one of the things that Bill points out is that in the beginning, God put the sun and the moon and all of that up. He put it up there for signs. Appointed, that would point to certain appointed times. You know. And so now we see all of the blood moons, and do I understand all there is to know about all of that? No. But I got sense enough to know that when all of this stuff starts happening and corresponding with other things that God has done, as far as feast days, and we see these things taking place all together, and then they're corresponding with Jubilee, and they're corresponding with sabbatical year, and all of this taking place at the same time. You know, I got sense enough to know that it looks like God's up to something, about ready for something to take place. You know, what it is, I don't know. It could be one of the one of the prophesied wars in the Middle East, because it looks like all it takes is somebody looking at somebody wrong over there, and war would break out. You know, it looks like that everybody wants to get a nuclear weapon. You know, yes, ma'am.
BB, you know, from Netanyahu, when he came over here, was giving us a final opportunity to join with them, because Israel's going to do something whether we're with them or not. Don't you think that was our final warning, or in a way that if you're not going to join us, we're going to do it by ourselves?
I don't know. That's just one of those things I'm marking down.
When he was talking, it was an urgency. You just do. If you don't, we'll go ahead. Which means, you know, they're not going to sit back and let Iran have a.
Well, and here's the thing is, we know God has got Israel in his hand. Now, we don't know that because Israel and Netanyahu and all of the, you know, the Knesset and all of them, you know, are such great people, you know. That's not it. God has made a covenant with Israel by Abraham, and God keeps his word. God's there. That Israel is, he said he put his name there, you know. And so God is watching, whatever. I know there's people that are worried about Israel being destroyed. I don't see that happening again. I say God has brought Israel back together, and Israel will be there when this is all over. Will there be a lot of people die? Yes, there'll be a lot of people die. We understand from Revelation that over 2/3 of the people of Israel will die. Sounds like some kind of nuclear event to me. Now we've got Saudi Arabia have made a deal with South Korea for a nuclear device. So we got Saudi Arabia, we got Iran, all trying to come up with some nuclear device, and that's all we need is something to break loose. In fact, the matter is, when you read about the Battle of the Gog-Magog conflict, you see that it takes 7 months for them to just gather up the remnants of the weaponry that was used. And then it says that if somebody is going through the land and they see something that they're not supposed to touch it, you know, or try and pick it up, they're supposed to mark it, and notify the officials about it. And what it sounds like to me is that some nuclear event has taken place, and they're marking those things that are radioactive, that they discovered, so that the authorities can come in and remove those things from the land. So, is everything shaping up for a catastrophic event to take place there? I think so. Yes, sir.
It states there that Israel will not cease to exist and that it will not be expelled from the land that they're in. States that in the Bible. So, they're back, they're gonna stay, they're gonna be there. And also it states in the Bible where men will be standing up and the flesh will fall from the bones, their tongues will rot in their mouths and their eyes will rot in their sockets. What else but a nuclear weapon?
Yeah, that's another thing that in the God conflict that makes you think that there's going to be a nuclear event is because the eyeballs melting in their sockets and their tongue in their mouths. Yes, sir.
I heard someone say something about all the Jews are going to go back to Israel. And Bibi, I listened real close, and he said he asked all the Jews to come home where he could protect them.
Yeah.
There in Jerusalem.
There's Jews from Ukraine
Yeah.
that are coming back. There's Jews out of Europe that are coming back now because of the anti-Semitism in Europe. And so there are people gathering, there are people coming back to that land. I mean, even as we speak. Somebody else. Yes, sir.
Read 6 World War back then, about how they interviewed both sides, Israel and the enemy, and how God worked in that 6-day war. I mean, the enemy, they had one interview where he was on a tank, and there was an Israelite down here who was shooting, and he froze. He couldn't shoot him. And there was a lot of different stories from both sides, but how God worked in that room, and he couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I've watched that.
I said, now you're gonna tell me that somebody's gonna take Israel out?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I watched that series where it talks about some of the events that took place during the various wars. In the last, when they were shooting the rockets in this last event, somebody interviewed somebody in Gaza, and they said, well, the reason our rockets are not hitting what we aim them at is their God is deflecting them. Well, if it was me and I was shooting rockets into another country and their God was kicking them off out in the ocean or blowing them up, I'd say, well, that's the God I want to serve, and I would change, Look, we didn't even get into the Jeremiah today, but
We still got 4 more years.
we can go another 4 or 5 years.